Hi everyone, today Sammy and I will be discussing the transgender experience in the military, especially the issues that arise with the recent ban as discussed in the article. We will start by introducing the discussion questions, then go into the historical context, followed by more specific details of Trump's ban, as well as some statistics, and we'll be finishing with diving deeper into the article. As we give our presentation, please consider these questions. What role does the government play on society's view of the transgender community? How does this ban change society's attitudes? What opportunities do transgender people lose from this ban? How will they be affected? Prior to 1960, there was no specific ban on transgender people joining the military. However, there were many dangers to those that were discovered, as it was often considered a mental illness. There was even a case in which a transgender man joined the military during the Civil War and continued to live under this identity afterwards, only to be found out when he had medical complications that required a doctor's attention. He was then sent to a psych ward to live out the rest of his life. In 1960, Army Regulation 4501 was put in place, declaring that gender dysphoria was a mental illness that was unfit for the military. Thereafter, there were many court cases, such as Orr v. Leyland and Doe v. Alexander, none of which ruled in favor of the transgender individuals, stating that their facilities were unfit to care for them. Interestingly enough, the ban comes not long after the publication Transvestia, the Journal of Equality of Dress, started by Virginia Prince, a male crossdresser, and the Cooper D. Nuts riot of 1959, where drag queens, lesbians, gay men, and transgender individuals fought against police harassment. This journal is also known as the beginning of the transgender movement, as it was the first time that transgender stories were made public, and the Cooper D. Nuts riots marked the beginning of trans activism in San Francisco. The ban lasted until 2016, when the ban was lifted and transgender individuals were allowed to openly serve in the military. This isn't to say that there were no transgender individuals in the military. This was just the first time that they were openly allowed to be transgender. This also follows the repeal of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy in 2011.
On March 12, 2019, the Defense Department issued a memorandum ordering the military to adopt a new policy for transgender members of the military. The New York Times says that under the new rules, troops and recruits can identify as transgender, but must use the uniforms, pronouns, and sleeping in bathroom facilities for their biological sex. They will not be allowed to serve if they have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, a disorder in which a person's gender identity does not match their physical gender at birth. The policy exempts transgender troops who have already transitioned or have begun the medical process. Anyone who defies the regulations in the future would be forced out of the military. The policy took effect on April 12, 2019. It was scheduled to expire on March 12, 2020, but has since been extended until September 12, 2020. When questioned about the policy, department officials stated, any service member with a medical condition such as gender dysphoria has a potential negative impact on force readiness and should be evaluated. All service members equally must meet established readiness standards to maintain the effectiveness and lethality of the force. Let's look at a quick overview of transgender individuals in the military. From the creation of the military until 1960, there was an implicit ban on transgender service members. Although no formal legislation was passed, LGBTQ+ members were routinely fired and dishonorably discharged from the military. Gender dysphoria was seen as a mental disability. From 1960 until June 30th, 2016, a blanket ban was instated to prevent all transgender people from serving and enlisted in the United States military. Then, from June 30th, 2016 to January 1st, 2018, the ban was repealed and transgender individuals in the military were allowed to serve in their identified or assigned gender upon completing transition. Just 2 years after the repeal of the ban, from January 1st, 2018 to April 11th, 2019, transgender individuals could enlist in the military only if they had been stable for 18 months in their identified or assigned gender. Now, since April 12, 2019, transgender personnel in the United States military are not allowed to serve or enlist in the military except if they serve in their original sex assignment, have been grandfathered in prior to April 12, 2019, or were given a waiver.
Trump's claims on the cost of caring for transgender individuals in the military is clearly misconstrued, as the budget for healthcare of veterans is less than 10% of the DoD's whole budget. And of the healthcare budget for veterans, less than 1% goes towards transgender veterans. The cost of providing Viagra is 5 times the $8.4 million cost of caring for transgender soldiers. Furthermore, in 2015, the U.S. Transgender Survey found that 15% of USTS respondents were veterans, which is nearly 2 times the rate of the U.S. population. Of the USTS respondents that were veterans, 10% were unemployed prior to joining the military, which is also 2 times the rate of the U.S. general population. 34 experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. Of those that were in the military, many respondents were out to their commanding officers, said leadership took steps to support them. 47% supported their name change, and 36% supported their transition-related medical treatment.
Now we will examine a few quotes from the article, which discusses the other legislation that has been passed to remove protections from transgender people in addition to the military ban. The article first discusses the loss of military benefits, which is a key reason why many transgender people join the military. One graduate student interviewed in the article, Nicholas Talbot, was told in May that he would no longer be eligible for placement as an Army officer. He could continue participating in the Reserve Officers Training Corps program, but the benefits that he joined for, health insurance and student loan forgiveness, were no longer available to him. These benefits are greatly needed by many service members. Transgender individuals, in particular, are especially susceptible to homelessness and poverty due to discrimination in the housing market and by potential employers. 1 in 5 transgender individuals have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. When the U.S. government removes transgender service members' primary source of income in healthcare, they leave them vulnerable to poverty, illness, and homelessness. In justification of the ban, a White House official said that those efforts were merely correcting efforts by the Obama administration that exceeded presidential authority and to ensure that agencies were following the letter of the law. Trump's administration claims that they are protecting the rights of people who do not want to share bathrooms or sleeping accommodations with transgender people, while safeguarding the religious and moral freedoms of medical professionals and others. The attack on transgender protections may also be a way for the Trump administration to garner political support, as Trump's main voting base of conservative Republicans shows little support for transgender rights. However, Trump's legislation has clear impacts on the transgender community. Crimes against transgender people rose by 34% in 2018, and at the time the article was written, at least 22 transgender people had been fatally shot or killed in 2019, according to the Human Rights Campaign. Nearly all of them were Black women. Some fear that Trump's administration's policies could be interpreted by some as a signal that such attacks are acceptable. The Human Rights Campaign now reports that at least 26 transgender people were killed in 2019, and 5 more have been killed so far in 2020. In an unstable political climate where hatred against the transgender community only continues, Trump's removal of transgender rights protections is worrying. His legislation continues to send messages to society that exclusion of and violence against transgender people is acceptable. In the film we watched, we see similar themes arise. In the film, Ludo's family, neighbors, and entire school community fixates on her gender identity. They clearly feel threatened that Ludo crosses, or at least attempts to cross, gender boundaries. Even though Ludo's peers are still young, we already see an instance of violence against Ludo when her soccer teammates beat her up in the locker room. Ludo's own parents also exhibit anger and violence towards Ludo over her gender identity, and they blame her for the hate crimes that their neighbors commit, such as the graffiti on their house. Although progress has been made in the transgender rights movement, the hate and discrimination that Ludo experiences from almost everybody she interacts with parallels the discrimination that transgender people receive today. The hatred that Ludo's family and neighbors show are learned traits, though, from implicit social cues in their interactions and explicit rules from the government. Because they are learned traits, this makes us wonder what role the government plays in their views. Would the attitudes towards Ludo change if the government had enacted protections for transgender people? Or would the government only take action once attitudes had already changed? Hopefully our presentation has given you all a lot to reflect on. Now we want you to take 5 minutes to free write about the concept questions we showed at the beginning of the presentation, and then we can discuss them after. Thank you for watching.